Based on the results of thousands of years of history, one may get the impression that the harmonious life of people on the planet is an impossible phenomenon and contradicts the essence of things. Objectively, human life is now impossible on other planets, for example on Mars or Saturn. Therefore, it is necessary to correct the mistakes made in the arrangement of people's lives on our planet. Numerous diseases, viruses, social cataclysms, and ecological catastrophes, which are increasingly occurring on Earth, are being presented through the degreed near-scientific circles as a direct result of the excessive overpopulation of the planet. To better understand the real scale of the overpopulation problem, imagine for a moment that we have declared a general mobilization and gathered the entire population of the planet in one place. At the end of 2011, this number was 7 billion people. We will accommodate 2 people per square meter, which is several times more spacious than at rush hour in a subway car, or in a crowded stadium during a match. As a result, a square is formed with one side a little over 59 kilometers. To visualize this size, let's put the resulting square on the map of Moscow. It is outlined in red on the plan. And it will become obvious what a relatively small area is needed to accommodate the entire population of the planet. If we take only the population of Russia, then, acting in this way, a square with a side of 8 kilometers will be obtained. It is marked in green on the map. On a planet-wide map, this square, containing the entire population of the planet, is barely visible. After the population of the entire Earth has been mentally concentrated in one place, the real situation with the imaginary overpopulation of the planet becomes clear. Obviously, with such a concentration, people will not be able to stay for a long time. They need space for movement and maintenance of hygiene, housing, food, a place for applying labor to reveal their intellectual and creative potential, and so forth. But now, when it's become obvious that there is enough space for everyone, and moreover with a large margin for many millennia to come, questions arise. How to reasonably disperse people across the planet? How to equip their labor and life? How is it necessary to distribute the area on their native land in such a way that there no longer is an imaginary feeling of the overpopulation of the planet? We can say that the plan of the settlement is a projection on the plane of the lifestyle that its inhabitants lead. This projection directly reflects the ideals and priorities of society, its obviousness and logics of behavior, the character of needs, and, not least, the general culture of governance with its inadequacy and vices. One of the manifestations of the historically established governance towards the given process, its figurative expression, is metropolitan urbanization. The seeming at first glance diversity of manifestations of metropolitan urbanization throughout the planet are in fact no different from each other, and the visible difference is just an imaginary diversity of scenery. The essential picture is the same everywhere: overpopulation in cities, a decrease in the general level of health of residents, an increase in the number of accidents, emergencies, etc. are observed everywhere. Previously, the form of settlement was the village. But after all, almost all modern cities have grown from the former village settlements. Since the organization of the village space does not imply limiting the growth of its size, this subsequently served as an impetus for the further extensive expansion of the territory of settlements. And as a result, what was within walking distance, hospitals, gymnasiums, food shops, terminals, and so forth, moved away from each other for kilometers, to overcome which new roads were built, which subsequently required further expansion of streets and highways to the detriment of residential areas. In the past, the main reason for the exodus to the cities was the yoke of the church. It was precisely for the sake of spiritual freedom from the monopolistic pressure of idealistic atheism that people fled to the cities, where they were awaited by pressure with a lower priority: usury. Usury, in turn, gave rise to an absolutely artificial process in cities and metropolitan areas: daily labor migration. In the morning from the periphery to the city, in the evening back from the city to the periphery. This is such a kind of gravity of megacities which, like the moon, generates daily ebb and flow of the city resource. Objectively, now, along with the process of urbanization, the opposite process is gaining momentum: deurbanization. Each major city is overgrown with green rings of dachas and vegetable gardens, which are constantly pushed aside by urban development to the periphery. People feel the unnaturalness of conditions of the city and unconsciously strive for nature, for fresh air. Due to the fact that the process of deurbanization proceeds spontaneously, it becomes not an alternative, but just a suburban modification of metropolitan urbanization, since cramped patches of dacha plots are not enough for a full-fledged life and serve only as a platform for short-term weekend resorts. A full-fledged alternative, both urban and suburban modification of metropolitan urbanization, should be landscape estate urbanization. In landscape estate urbanization, the family is understood as the most significant social institution, the seed from which society grows. Accordingly, the design and construction of residential buildings is very important among the entire list of the vector of objectives of governance. If we go into the inner meaning of the Russian word family, semya, then these are 7 selves. But if this is so, then the question of the personal composition of these 7 selves inevitably arises. In our understanding, these are adults who have married, and the parents of each of them, plus a child, at least one, who was conceived, born, and upbrought by those who entered marriage. That is, a family is a child, his father and mother, 2 grandfathers and 2 grandmothers, each of his family lines of ancestors. Thus, houses should be designed with the expectation of a full-fledged family. One needs to upbring children on the ground, and not in the sky-high heights of concrete skyscrapers. With this understanding of the family, a low-rise building with an area at the base of the foundation of 10 by 10 meters or more is suitable. Obviously, the materials for such a house should be ecologically friendly, with a minimal use of polymer and various synthetic elements. The house for the family and the plot are one, and together form an estate. The size of the plot is primarily affected by the total number of people in the family, as a minimum based on the calculation of 3 acres per person. This ratio of area per person provides sufficient conditions for full-fledged development. Taking this proportion as a basis, it turns out that the minimum size of a plot for a family is 25 acres. Now let's move on to the shape of the plot. For the settlement model considered in this video, a trapezoid-shaped site was chosen. What positive properties does this shape give to the site as a whole? Or is it just some kind of whim to artificially give the uniqueness of the settlement model? Firstly, within the majority of possible shapes, the trapezoid belongs to the list of least fanciful ones, and as a result will not subsequently lead to problems when transferring the settlement model to nature on a specific piece of land. That is, for a geodesist, it will be no more complicated than an ordinary rectangle, since a trapezoid consists of 2 triangles on which geodesy operates. The shape of the trapezoid is closest to the already familiar and accustomed to rectangle, which excludes its rejection both by builders and subsequent owners. A trapezoid, unlike a rectangle, itself strives for diversity, self-organization, and develops into more lively curvilinear models. As a result, when choosing a trapezoid, the plastic basis of the design of the districts of a low-rise settlement become a diverse curvilinear shape. We call this the plastic matrix of the trapezoid. That is, the very shape of the trapezoid, when comparing elements and sections, stimulates, tunes in to the formation of more living silhouettes of the districts and streets of the settlements than a rectangle can do. If some of the trapezoids are turned to the center of the circle not with a small base, but with a large one, then through this it is possible to indirectly control the radius of the resulting shape. Also in this way you can get the radius of the changing curvature. The plots are formed with each other into a common area, not on their bare form, but are first framed by a buffer belt of trees and shrubs 10 to 15 meters wide. In turn, the buffer belts, when compiling sections, do not close closely, but at a distance of 10 to 20 meters from each other. Such a size of settlement is purpose consonant in order to be able to take the path on foot from the most remote point of the village to the center. This would take no more than 25 to 30 minutes. So if the average speed of a pedestrian is 3 to 5 kilometers per hour, then the optimal diameter of the settlement is within 3 to 3.5 kilometers, which is an area of about 1,000 to 1,500 hectares. And the size of the population should be no more than 2.5 to 3,000 inhabitants, so that each person can personally know and fully communicate with at least a third of the total number of inhabitants. The rest will be compensated by cross-acquaintances of each of the residents. In order not to continue to produce exorbitantly developing urban monsters, the plan of the settlement, its structure, must contain within itself an algorithm that prevents the exorbitant growth of its own size and maintains the ratio between the territories of human life and nature, so that it doesn't turn out again that there is a city separately, and separately places of rest. That is, nature should be a full-fledged component of the settlement, be its integral part, not as it happens now when you can get to nature only when you're outside the city. In order for the low-rise settlement to contain the limit of potential growth so that the internal algorithm directs and restrains the growth rate of the settlement in the future, the choice was made in the plan drawing in the form of a hexagon. Along with the well-known properties of the hexagon, such as maximum stability and strength, multiple symmetry, universality, the hexagon occupies a middle position between an absolute round circle and the angularity of the rectangle. That is, the prism equally contains the potential inclinations of both circles and rectangular figures. But still, in the classic hexagon, there is no restrictive limit to overgrowth. If we take a hexagon as a basis in its pure form, then it won't differ in any way from a rectangle in its appetite for expansion on a plane. Therefore, it is necessary to breathe life into it, to give dynamics to the internal structure, for which the following transformation was made. In nature, on planet Earth, and in the entire universe as a whole, spiral shapes, the dynamics of which is built in the golden ratio, predominate. Quite a lot of similar examples have already been found, and they can easily be found on the internet. Let us try to combine these two principles, the statics of the hexagon and the dynamics of the spiral. To build a classic hexagon, we would take a segment, lay it out on a plane, then attach the same segment to it at an angle of 60 degrees. And, acting in this way, after 6 steps we would close the shape and get a regular hexagon. When constructing a dynamic hexagon, we will also lay out the first segment, but postponing the next segment at an angle of 60 degrees, we will increase its length by the increment obtained by the golden ratio. We will do the same with all the other parts. And the result is a dynamic hexagon designed into a spiral, an endless spiral, and containing the seed of the golden ratio. Making along the axis of the spiral a green corridor, the width of which also increases along the golden ratio on each subsequent segment. Thus, the forest area necessary for each development sector is provided. In this way, the balance between the territory of the forest and living area is solved. This forest corridor must be protected from any development, and as such it will be an ecological reserve for the stability of the settlement. A low-rise settlement of a landscape estate type should absorb the comfort of the city and the closeness of nature inherent in the village. This should be a qualitatively different level of organization of lives of people. The settlement should have high-quality roads, electricity, heat, high-speed internet, telephone communications, and the like. In low-rise settlements of the landscape estate type, there must be their own nurseries, kindergartens, their own schools, their own universities, their own libraries, concert halls, and houses of culture, warehouses, common parking lots, administrative buildings, as well as enterprises and factories that will provide permanent place of work for their residents. Only in this case will low-rise settlements be viable. We are deeply convinced that people should live on their land in low-rise buildings and surrounded by nature, and not in reinforced concrete boxes. At the same time, landscape estate urbanization is not a magic recipe or a panacea for the problems generated by the biospheric social crisis. No one can also guarantee that we will be insured against the danger of becoming a society of a previous community made up of scoundrels, because the new life will not come by itself. For even today, as thousands of years ago, the kingdom of God is only being proclaimed, but everyone enters into it through their meaningful volitional efforts. Even no ideal house, even if it is a log house ecologically friendly to the last chip, will save you from disorder at the level of the settlement and throughout the world as a whole. The best motivation to work is by the personal example of the deed. That is why we took pencils and paper and began to create sketches and notes, which are now embodied in specific models of a low-rise landscape estate-type settlement, which this video introduces. We will continue to create other models of settlements on the principle of landscape estate urbanization, and this program is the minimum for our creative team, while the maximum program is the transformation of our native planet into a blooming garden by creating low-rise landscape estate-type settlements in a specific area.